I was worried this was going to seem long, but those guys went, so this is going to seem very short. I wrote it all here, so it's a tight 6 or 7. I asked Sue and Michael and Claire if I could speak today because I knew that I wanted to honor Gary with words. It's true that in times like these, in the face of tremendous loss, especially sudden loss, that words cannot express. But why not try? And it wouldn't be the first time Gary gave me a little push. Gary was often the first person to step up during a family gathering, and I imagine many other types of gatherings too, in community and in work. He had a gift for bringing intention to a moment with his words, his humor, and his storytelling. So when duty called, he gathered his thoughts and rose to the occasion. This is the man he was, and I admired him for it. I've been thinking about some of the words in my lifelong exchange with Gary, the bits of conversations I've had with him, the occasional "Hey you" email, the music lyrics he liked, the quick texts or pictures sent. Taken on their own, they are just minutes out of our days. But taken together, I see now that each message is some kind of marker on a completed trail. I don't know everyone here, but I know that each one of us in this room has their own path with Gary. Hundreds, even thousands of miles and markers traveled with the people here today. Races, triathlons, rides to practice, trips to the hardware store. Each special in their exchange of energy and personal truth. I can only speak to my own, but perhaps you'll hear a little bit of yours in mine. Gary Brennan was my uncle and my godfather. As a kid, I didn't understand all of what the word godfather meant or what the duties of godfather entailed, but I allowed my small self to accept the sense of comfort knowing that Aunt Sue and Uncle Gary were on backup duty. Meanwhile, Uncle Gary, being the adult, did understand the assignment, and he rose to that occasion too. One of the assigns of godfather is to help one steer their spiritual and moral path. Gary and I were in church together maybe just a few times, the first of which was my baptism as a baby. But Gary worked his godfather magic outside of the walls of church and the orthodoxy of Scripture. Anything that needed saying could be said while on a mountain trail, or planting a tree, or beyond the breakwater, while waiting for the next set to come in, or while riding shotgun in his truck. If I'm honest, I can't recall much of what was said at all, but I remember the togetherness. I remember his genuine curiosity, his real-life detective lines of questioning. I remember the feeling of being steadied on my path, a steadiness that will always be with me. Tucked up into the mountains of San Bernardino, there is a cabin many of us know. Deer trophies on the walls, plywood floors in the kitchen, and bunk beds downstairs. And bunk beds downstairs where the sleep was only available until 5 a.m. when the glassy lake water called. We made a lot of memories with the Brennans at dawn on Big Bear Lake. Michael reminded me the other day that a lot of these memories start with these choice words. Who's first? To this day, the words alone give me a shiver. Yes, a temperature shiver, but also adrenaline. Jumping in, Gary throwing out the rope, the ski, and words of encouragement slapping the water all at once. Okay, hit it. Hanging on, getting yanked over the top of the skis that were tied together. Gary throwing out the rope again and again and again, patiently, until, the words collected and I was up on 2 skis, eventually showing off just like him on 1. Gary was a great teacher. Work is life. Words so illustrative they made it onto a surfboard for Gary. When Gary retired, the people wondered, what will he do without the force? After some time, you might say that he rose to the occasion of retirement, which is true, but more to the point, you might say that he showed up to love more life, learning to play the fiddle, going on hunting and fishing trips with his favorite guys, growing a big, friendly cop stash, making new, lifelong friends, spending more quality time with family, and being a super duper granddad. all still miraculously without adding any body fat, by the way. But the rest of him was getting softer. Maybe it was all the sunshine. Maybe it was the new force in town, love. On March 29th, 2013, Gary writes, "I'm mid-read of an interesting book on the afterlife, Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander. Of course, the Holy Week readings were always some stimulating humility and service, etc." This is Gary speaking, by the way. "All of this has been so distracting, it's taken me 5 hours and a trip to the hardware store for parts, Dwayne Reed for IPA and life contemplation, to complete a simple half-hour sprinkler repair. Then, of course, a nice nap on the lawn in the sun under God's beautiful skies. This evening, Sue and I are attending a Good Friday service at the local Grace Bible Church, all part of my Lenten mission to explore other Christian faiths." By this time, I'm old enough to have Googled, what is a godfather's job? Also included role model. As I go back and look at the signs and examine them in 3 dimensions, in hindsight with the bird's eye view, I can see a godfather who is modeling how to live your best life, exploring faith, shedding old ways, letting light in, accepting new ideas, staying curious, making friends, continuing to serve, doing unto others. On May 6, 2018, Gary wrote, "Know that I'm very proud of you, Kate." He didn't have to say this, but he did at the end of a very long exchange. Where he introduced me to a retired police chief for an interview on the topic of LGBTQ history. What preceded the introduction was a lot of back and forth about documentary work I had done. It was basically a background check. So he could have been just referring to the work, but the word choice was meaningful to me. Last year, Gary took his buddies up to Lindsay and my cabin in the mountains to hike the trails. While he was there with his buddies, they repaired a lamp, sent pictures, left us handmade ceramic mugs, and 2 firefighter-approved fire blankets. As per the instructions, I attached one to the wall in the kitchen. Blazoned across the front pouch of this life-saving device are 2 words, one of the last signs on our shared path. They read, "Prepared Hero." As I contemplate these words, I think of how he has been preparing for his afterlife in every interaction, every new assignment, each of his volunteer positions, his commitment to his family, his brothers and sisters, Sue and then Michael and then Claire and Jen and Joe and Eamon and Mead and Genevieve. On November 28, 2024, in his last text to me, Gary wrote, "Have a wonderful Thanksgiving and thanks for the invite. Sorry we will not be there, but nice to be nearby grandkids." I bounced back the words, "Happy TGUG. Love to all your honeys and bunnies. More togetherness soon." It wasn't all as perfect as he had planned, and the path could have been a little longer. But he showed up, shirt tucked in, truck loaded up, warm water laundry bottles filled, thumbs directed inside his belt no matter the event, walking like a board with shoes, really. Ready to take part, take the lead, be of service. We all felt that, and we will feel it again someday. More togetherness soon.